Bonjour, Kinamagi and Ireland Indigenicas coming with this production of Social Studies Television. Today's episode, Social Studies Chapter 4, Section 3, Cities. Begin here in your packet, and we're going to be looking at the same guided inquiry questions about climate, motivation, and how did the status of the colonists affect where and how they lived. Vocabulary, commerce, that's buying and selling and trade. Self-sufficient means you can make everything you need. Plantations are very large farms. And we think of plantations, we think of slavery, as plantations in the South did feature slavery, and even some smaller farms in the North. And indigo, a crop used for a dye. So let's begin reading it. And first thing I notice is this huge bar graph. Population of colonial cities in 1760. Philadelphia, New York, Boston, Charleston, and Newport, Rhode Island. You can see that the largest one is Philadelphia. I look over, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 24,000 people lived in Philadelphia. At this time, that's about what Mount Pleasant is today in population. New York City, a paltry 17,000. But again, this is now 260 years ago. Few people have moved in since. Have you ever wondered why a lot of big businesses are based in the city? Or perhaps you have wondered why there are so many small towns instead of a few big cities? Stranger still, have you ever wondered why the bulk of the land available is used for farming while people live cramped in the city? This system of living is not new. Even back in colonial times, people lived in one of the three areas: cities, towns, or farms. Cities. During colonial times, only about 5% of the people living in the colonies lived in cities. The five main cities at the time were Boston, Massachusetts, New York, Newport, Rhode Island, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Charleston, South Carolina. These cities were all located at a major ocean port. Why would the largest cities at the time be near a port? Well, if you're going to do city things like build stuff, it's a good spot to ship it out to the people who are going to buy it. Look at the chart on the left. Take a few minutes to figure out about how many people each city held at the time. We've already done that step. Then look up the current population for each of these cities. Are they still ranked the same in population? Is Philadelphia the largest? Nope. Newport the smallest? Probably. And why do you think that is? Well, immigration from around the world hadn't yet kicked in. The Statue of Liberty in Ellis Island was not yet a thing. As mentioned, most of the cities in colonial America formed along ports. This allowed the cities to become centers for commerce and defense. Cities quickly became places where people could find work, trade their goods, get an education, or learn a trade. Below is a picture of Alfred's Alley in Pennsylvania. It's considered one of the oldest continuously inhabited places in America. Most of the homes were built in the 1700s by Jeremiah Alfred, a local blacksmith. The street still looks like it did in the 1700s and can be visited today. It might have to be one of my next trips. Towns were incredibly important in the colonies. They were primarily self-sufficient. In other words, they were capable of taking care of themselves. Towns were very common in New England and the middle colonies. Most families had their own small plot of land where they grew the food they needed and could raise animals for meat. They had a church, school, blacksmith, and other necessary businesses to keep their town surviving. Town also had a town common, or green, which was basically a large open space in the center of town where people could meet and cattle and sheep could graze. One of the most important places in town was the meeting house. Here, people would meet to discuss town business. They would also use the building as a site for their church. As you learned in previous chapters, religion was very important to the colonists, so the place they met for church was very important to them. A possible activity, and you can click on this from the full chapter PDF, but not from the small couple page PDF that we use. Both will be linked in your Google Classroom. You can take link to a tour of the historic town of Williamsburg. It is a town in Virginia that has been around since colonial times. Um, and I've got the link right here. Let's say I wanted to visit where, let's see where Williamsburg even is in relation to where I'm standing right now. I want to zoom out just a little bit. You can see it's in between two rivers. And for me, it would be a pretty long drive to get to from where I'm sitting right now, as I'm sitting over in this area right here. So for me, for where I'm sitting, I'd have to go this way. This is Washington, D.C. and its famous Beltway. So it's going to be down in between about to the north of the Potomac, heading back towards the Atlantic. I might have to make a visit this summer and check some of these things out. But feel free to click on there and go check out your website. Southern plantations and farming. Even though there were many small towns and small farms in the southern colonies, some of the wealthiest farmers lived on plantations. This is a special type of very large farm where single cash crops like tobacco and indigo and later cotton were grown. Most of the work on the plantation was done by slaves. The plantation was really like its own small town and was almost totally self-sufficient. Each plantation had a planter's house where the owner's family lived. They also had barns, storage stables, and specialized workspaces a town would need, such as a blacksmith shop or a carpentry shop. On top of that, the plantation would have enough shacks to house all of its workers. Each plantation was normally run by the owner. He was usually referred to as the master or planter. These men were usually wealthy and owned large amounts of land. Even though plantations were usually run by men, there were a few cases where women would take over the plantation. One very successful woman was Eliza Lucas Pinckney. She took over the family plantation when she was just a teenager, only a few years older than you. She was also the first person in the colonies to successfully grow indigo. Another important person on the plantation, after the master, was the plantation manager or overseer. The overseer would give the slaves their work orders. It was his job to make sure the work got done, and he had the power to treat the slaves as he saw fit. Most overseers made the slaves work from dawn to dark, doing the work of the plantation, and beat them if they did not work hard enough. This work ranged from field work, working with farm animals, making and repairing farm tools, to cooking and cleaning or doing laundry. Not a very pleasant life to live right there. We have reached the end of this section. At this point, you should return to the Google Classroom and complete the Google form for the assignment. Hope you all had a minute learned something new, and bum up.